Hello learners, you're watching video on Hermione Squad, a group of literary students initiated. If you are new to this channel, please do like, share and subscribe. Today's video is on Commonwealth Period. So let's start. Commonwealth Period. Commonwealth was the political structure during the period from 1649 to 1660, when England and Wales, later along with Ireland and Scotland, were governed as a republic after the end of Second English Civil War and the trial and execution of King Charles I in 1649 to the restoration of the Stuart monarchy under King Charles II in 1660. This period, like the earlier two periods, belonged to the Puritan age. This is the period when there was no monarch in England. After the execution of Charles I on 30th January 1649, the Rump Parliament formed after Charles' supporters were kicked out of office, declared England a Commonwealth on May 1649 and a free collection of people ruled by Parliament and not a king. The Parliament got rid of the Privy Council and House of Lords as well as other branches of government so that it had complete control. And it was an unstable group of men who could not agree on exactly what form the new English Republic should take. And with the need for stability, Parliament appointed a man named Oliver Cromwell as the head of the state over the Commonwealth of England. In the Commonwealth period, a lot of people lost belief in the theory of divine right and majority of population started rebelling against it. During this period, middle class people raised very highly in London, which is considered as an important feature of this period. In this period, public theatres were closed for nearly 2 decades to prevent public assemblies that might foment civil disorder and to combat moral and religious transgression. Due to this reason, the genre drama almost disappeared for 18 years. While drama suffered, prose writings published prolifically. And it was the age of militants' political pamphlets. The Elizabethan romantic exuberance ended in this period. And also, the influence of Renaissance and Puritanism died out by the end of this period. And gradually, the English people realized that monarch was essential for them. Oliver Cromwell. As told earlier, with the death of Charles I, England came to be ruled by the Parliament, which was merely a ghost of its former self, as the Royalist members did not attend and the Presbyterians had been expelled. The new government consisted of the Parliament and the Council of State, which clung on to power for 4 years. However, the real ruler of England was Cromwell and his army. Oliver Cromwell was a political and military leader in the 17th century England who served as Lord Protector or head of the state of the Commonwealth of England, Scotland and Ireland until his death in 1658. After the death of Charles I, Cromwell was beset by enemies on all fronts. The rest of the world could not accept the fact that England was no longer without a monarch, that it had now become a republic. It was therefore Cromwell's first task was to prove to the world that England was a Commonwealth and he is its protector. Cromwell's position is unique in English history. He was England's first and last dictator and was one of the most controversial figures in the history of British Isle. He ruled England with an iron hand and was neither a hypocrite nor a weakling. He was sincere in all that he did, but the power that he built up by the virtue of his sword might disintegrate immediately after his death. He was a highly religious man and considered himself a good constable sent by divine providence to keep the peace of the parish. After he became the protector of England, Cromwell took up a course of action which made him no different from the Stuart monarchs who believed in the divine right of kings. Cromwell was indeed a powerful general and also a highly disciplined, systematic person who dealt with his problems one by one. He arrived in Ireland and set about systematically crushing its people into submission. After 9 months of harsh, repressive rule, Ireland was truly subjugated, and Cromwell earned the grudging admiration of the rest of the world for his expert generalship and his clean administration. His voice came to be listened with respect and admiration by the rest of the world. Reign of Oliver Cromwell. Cromwell was a very powerful man due to his control over Parliament's army. He was both a liberator and a dictator who enforced freedom to some but oppressed others. Surprisingly enough, Cromwell practiced more religious tolerance than his contemporaries. All the other Protestant sects were tolerated, and even the Catholics were not persecuted as horribly as they had been previously. He opened up England to religious freedom, although he pushed his Puritan beliefs. Cromwell revived the anti-Spain attitude in England. He demanded that Englishmen should not be molested by the notorious Spanish Inquisition. He entered into a treaty with the French, and an Anglo-French army launched an offensive against the Spanish army. The town of Dunkirk in the Spanish Netherlands became England's possession after this war. It was in Cromwell's time that the Parliament consisted of a proper representation of the various parts of the British Isle, and he officially incorporated Scotland into the Protectorate, thus giving a measure of unity to the whole island. Even though this kind of representation was thrown out after Restoration, the idea remained and came into true effect only in the 19th century. And Cromwell soon discovered that the Rump Parliament was rapidly outliving its usefulness, and the army wanted a new and more meaningful parliament to take its place. So, in 1653, he dismissed the Rump Parliament by force, setting up a short-lived nominated assembly known as Bourbon's Parliament before being invited by his fellow leaders to rule as Lord Protector of England, Scotland and Ireland from December 1653. As a ruler, he executed an aggressive and effective foreign policy. Later, he also found that the very parliament which had transformed him from a mere nobody to the absolute ruler of England was a stumbling block in his attempt to introduce several reforms in the land. And all the good schemes that he had in mind were strangled by the Parliament. Hence, Cromwell dismissed the Parliament in 1655. A second and a third Parliament also met with the same fate because neither of them seemed to fall in with the Protector's ideas of proper government of England. Having decided that Parliament was not an efficient means of getting his policies enacted, Cromwell instituted a system of direct military rule of England during a period known as the rule of the Major Generals. Then, all of England was divided into 10 regions. Each was governed directly by one of Cromwell's major generals, who were given sweeping powers to collect taxes and enforce peace. As a good constable of God, Cromwell tried to reform the national morals and manners. Ordinances were issued against many undesirable practices like drunkenness, dueling, horse racing, etc. As a Puritan, Cromwell ordered the closure of the theatres and all such frivolous practices. Men were supposed to conduct themselves decorously and properly as good servants of God and good subjects of the Protector. It was this aspect that caused Cromwell and the Puritan rule to be hated and feared by the people of England. In spite of the various reforms that had brought about, in spite of being able to preserve England's position as a premier country in Europe, Cromwell was unable to bring about a happy marriage between parliamentary institutions and personal rule, which had been the main reason for the downfall of the Stuarts. In 1658, the great general breathed his last, having brought peace of a sort to England. However, peace did not last long because the new protector, Cromwell's son Richard, was nowhere as strong or as capable as his father. So, the death of Oliver Cromwell marked the dissolution of Commonwealth. The main literary trends of Commonwealth age are its writing style, realism in poetry, epic elements, the emergence of metaphysical school, and poets wrote sonnets largely in this period. Writing style. Writing style of Commonwealth period was plain. Writers used simple sentences than ornamented language. There was less usage of metaphors and simile in the literary works. They used symbols to depict religious elements. John Donne was one of the most famous religious poets of this age. The literary work of Commonwealth period was all about spirituality. They talk about pilgrims and Johny. They tried to motivate society by creating the illusion of an ideal state. Realism in poetry. The next literary feature is realism. Earlier forms of love poetry were Petrarchan. One can see the Platonic forms of love in earlier forms of poetry, but Puritan love poetry was based on realism. Women were not seen as goddess, but a human with flesh and blood. A touch of epic elements. Milton was the one who brought the essence of epic in this age. His Paradise Lost books were the famous epics of the time period. Spenser's Faerie Queene was a romantic epic. The emergence of metaphysical school was another important element. Meta means beyond and physical means physical reality. Poems in this genre concerned with the nature of the thing rather than physicality. Poets largely wrote sonnets during Puritan age. Sonnets were popular because it was largely written during Elizabethan age. This is all about Commonwealth period. Our next video will be on Restoration period. So, thank you all and stay tuned.